after bombing the Iranian nuclear facilities at Fordow and Nasfahan and disabling the two above ground facilities with 30 Tomahawk missiles and disabling, to what capacity, we did not know, the underground facility with the 30,000-pound bombs, Trump then declared peace. The Iranians fired at an American military base in Doha, our largest base in the Middle East. Didn't really do significant damage, didn't wound any soldiers as far as we know. And then after that, Trump said, hey, we got forewarning. This didn't really do much damage to us. Let's have a ceasefire. We are having peace. And then he declared a ceasefire. He declared a ceasefire had been found after, making this public cry for peace. And then after he declared a ceasefire had been made between the United States, Iran, and Israel, we then got basically immediate disputes of that through some Iranian sources. Then others jumped on that. And then the Israelis said that they were bombed by the Iranians, with missiles penetrating Israeli airspace and hitting targets inside of Israel past the ceasefire deadline. Iran denies this. The Israelis continue to accuse them of this. There are sites that look like they have been hit by missiles inside of Israel. Israel's defense minister then came out and said that they were going to do an amount of strikes against the Iranians in response at different targets. And they were preparing to. And then Trump got really angry. And he reportedly, as the ceasefire that he negotiated started to fall apart, and the Israelis were preparing for a huge set of strikes, called the Israelis and told them to reel it in. And basically, according to how it's being reported right now, convinced the Israelis to not go nearly as hard with the strikes against Iran and, limit their response. And then the Iranians responded to that saying that, okay, well, if the Israelis don't attack us, we won't attack them. And we don't have peace, as Trump keeps declaring. But after the ceasefire initially failed with more strikes coming past that, now they're trying to settle into a second ceasefire, as Israel and Iran both tentatively are at least open to the idea of a ceasefire, and they're saying they're willing to play ball if the other side plays ball, as they accuse the other side of not playing ball, which is, of course, the concern. Now, as this was going on, as this process was breaking down, Donald Trump reacted furiously to the press around this, dropping this clip that's pretty famous now, where he starts cussing about both parties, releasing anger.
The Iran strikes only pushed back Iran's nuclear program a few months. Is it even possible to tell how much damage was done?
Thank you for the $10. We'll get to that in a bit, but I first want to talk about the ceasefire, and then we'll get to that. Thank you for the $10, though. So Trump then drops this line while talking to the press as the ceasefire is falling apart and the Israelis look like they're about to do a new set of strikes. He says this to the press about the Israelis and the Iranians.
That have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
Saying that both the Iranians and the Israelis have been fighting for so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck that they are doing. Now, most of his critique, funnily enough, actually was directed towards Israel in the public forum, as he was trying to pressure them to limit their response to the Iranians, as he commented that the Iranian missile strikes, which he did not deny occurred after the ceasefire, but he just says, oh, it's like a one-off missile strike. It's like, oh, it got fired and it got intercepted. It is what it is. Basically, he's saying that it's a small price to pay for a ceasefire at this moment, after they had gone through with these strikes on these nuclear facilities. American military assets had not gotten a hard military response that resulted in significant damage or the deaths of American soldiers. The United States has not seemingly been entangled in a wider war in the region. And so Trump, when it comes to stopping, getting entangled in a wider war, when it comes to a lack of blowback on American military assets or American personnel, and the fact that he did get to strike the Iranian nuclear program in an attack that was more aggressive than anything else an American president has done towards the program, with very little to no blowback. I mean, Trump has the avenue here to really get out of this seemingly scot-free. I mean, there's a question about the constitutionality of all of this, but I mean, we all know that Mike Johnson and Senator Thune are not going to go out there and fight for the War Powers Act to be respected. In fact, instead of fighting for, respecting of what is the laws on the books, Mike Johnson is currently questioning whether the laws on the books should be respected, period.
It also requires that the president inform Congress within 48 hours of use of military force. Obviously, President Trump did that. Obviously, in the modern era with the 24-hour news cycle and social media, nothing goes by unnoticed. This might have made some sense in 1973, but I'm not even sure it was constitutional, and I'll tell you about that as well. Many respected constitutional experts argue that the War Powers Act is itself unconstitutional. I'm persuaded by that argument. They think,
mind you, Donald Trump is using the AUMF, the Authorization for Use of Military Force, post 9/11, in order to fight terrorists, to bomb an Iranian atomic weapons program and civilian energy program, depending on who you ask. But of course, is both dual use, bombing it. And the reason why we know it's not just civilian, for anybody curious, is because anything past 3% enrichment is not for civilian use, and they're going past 60. But they're saying that he can just bomb any country at any time and doesn't have to tell Congress beforehand, as long as Congress finds out after the fact, which, well, yeah, when it comes on the headlines, I guess Congress will find out. Is this preposterous power to give the United States president just because he is the commander-in-chief? Could this drag us into war after war after war, where American men and women could die with no consultation to Congress? Absolutely. Is Mike Johnson seemingly bothered by that? Not at all. But when it comes to that type of constitutionality, is that going to bother the American people? Maybe. It seems that the majority of the American public are against these strikes on Iran, while now the majority of the Republican Party has switched, a lot of it almost overnight, and being in favor of these strikes on Iran. The majority of the American public are still against it. Maybe that will change if the only blowback is no dead American soldiers, a few rockets fired at our base in Doha, a crippled Iranian nuclear program, and we're not entangled in any wider war, especially if this ceasefire holds and then grows into something that is more stable and lasts long term. Well, then maybe with time and reflection, Trump can walk away with this, whether or not it came through by, well thought out planning and, careful consideration and all of the, necessary parties being duly considered and listened to, or if it was something that Trump just kind of shot from the hip on. It could still end with Trump taking largely the geopolitical W as the person who went farther with less blowback and did more damage to the atomic weapons program than any of his presidential contemporaries. So maybe that will be reflected by an American public acceptance of this. Maybe it won't, as he has really painted himself as the anti-war president and engaging in this type of behavior, no matter what he wants to call it. People see it as war-making behavior. People fundamentally understand, because they're human beings, that if they were to get bombed, they would see it as an act of war against them. For the president to go and bomb another country is potentially war-making. Whether or not it starts a war between the United States and Iran, which, in the contemporary sense, we have troops on the ground and there's attacks every day and, possibly some sort of ground battles, whether they take place in Iran or they take place in Iraq with Khatib Hezbollah or wherever. That's separate from the fact that people understand that this is an act that can lead to war. And so wrapping yourself in that banner and then trying to unravel that so rapidly is going to come with trouble, as we saw with Candace Owens, as we saw with Tucker Carlson, as we saw with Steve Bannon, as we saw with any other number of alt media commentators, and even a few within the party. Of course, Thomas Massey has always kind of saw himself as, a libertarian independent, but there is at least some that were concerned about this. But we're going to have to wait and see for that, because the ceasefire that he put through failed on impact, but that often happens in this process. It's embarrassing. It doesn't spell a good omen for the long-term success of this project, for the long-term success of the ceasefire. But ceasefires are often choppy at their launch, as each side tries to basically nudge the other through the red line of when the fighting is supposed to stop up until the end, to try to get the final say, the final message that they can deliver to their people, the final little bit of damage, so they can either edge out a slightly less humiliating loss, or a slightly more dominant victory. So while initially this ceasefire has failed, whether it'll fail in the long term, now that Iran, Israel, and the United States have all agreed to it, and it's supposed to be in effect at this point right now, we'll have to wait and see. Mind you, what has been agreed to is a ceasefire, not a peace deal, not a settlement, not some sort of agreement on the Iranian nuclear program and where it goes from here, and an agreement that Iran will never get atomic weapons, no agreement that Iran will no longer fund proxies like Hezbollah or Kataib Hezbollah, or that the Israelis will no longer strike within Iran, or that they will, continue to, not continue to, engage in sabotage operations within Iran. None of that has been agreed to. It is simply a ceasefire. So this is something that could break down in the next few hours. This is something that could break down next few days, next few months, or it's something that could grow into something more stable. I will say that there's a few risks to the ceasefire. The first risk is that if Trump gets distracted and the Israelis feel like that they can get more out of some more bombing runs and disabling more air defense systems, but namely killing more Iranian nuclear scientists, they may very well break that ceasefire. I don't think that there's much motivation for the Iranians to do it. I think the Iranians right now, it would make more sense if they tried to recuperate their launcher systems, if they tried to recuperate their air defense systems, as they've lost a lot of Russian S-300 and S-400 long-range air defense systems, and it's not like the Russians have a lot of those to spare right now to help them recoup their losses. So I think that it would make sense if they spent some time not trying to, I don't want to say poke the bear, so to speak, but not trying to reignite these types of strikes. And that might be difficult, considering that there is still much demand for action to be taken on Gaza. But it's not like the Iranians have not been willing to allow Gaza to feel pain as they recuperate, and as has been the case with other proxies in the region as well, whether that be the fall of the Assad regime, whether that be some of the critiques that come from Hezbollah leadership of how they felt abandoned by Iran. But I'm just putting forward that there could be motivations down the line to violate the ceasefire. There could be misunderstandings or flare-ups that could lead to an end to the ceasefire. And there could be always the ever-present threat of Trump getting distracted and dragged into a different topic, which derives American attention elsewhere, or American military resources elsewhere, that then make the Iranians feel, or the Israelis feel, that they can violate this without drawing America's ire, both because, hey, from the Israeli perspective, Trump isn't going to get angry at us and breathe down our neck, or from the Iranian perspective, hey, the Americans are busy right now, I don't think they can follow up with more strikes with B-2 bombers. So a lot of this stability could depend upon how engaged the United States is to either A, pressure the Israelis, or B, follow up with more actions against the Iranians. Some of this might be dependent upon the domestic political considerations of both parties. The Iranians wanting to, not continue to build opposition to the government domestically, which is significant amongst the youth, and they're a very young country. And if they engage in another military conflict where they're losing their atomic facilities, their air defense systems are getting blown up, and to be quite honest, they're getting the worst end of the stick in most of the interactions. I do not think that's going to portray the government, which has spent significant time and resources diverting Iranian taxpayer dollars towards military projects across the region and at home, to just see those go up in flames as the standard of living for Iranians continues to suffer. I don't think that's going to be something that buoys the public support for the government. And on the flip side, after 600 days of war for the Israeli people, with more dissent growing within the reserves and amongst the opposition and general society, with the majority of Israelis, when polled, saying they want to find a peace, there are domestic political pressures on this. But on the other hand, the longer this goes on, the longer Israel's embattled Prime Minister Netanyahu can continue to delay his political battle. Then again, is this a flag that he can wave around to say, look, I might have been portrayed as the security prime minister, and October 7th happened under the security prime minister after I was the longest serving Israeli prime minister in our nation's history. And that might mean that the security failure falls at my feet. But look what I did to Iran afterwards. Look what I did for the atomic weapons program, one of the biggest threats to Israel's security. Look what I did to Hezbollah and pushing them out of the south. Look what I did to Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Of course, that is an ongoing project as the fighting continues to intensify in the Gaza Strip and civilians are killed at food drop-off points, and the fighting is as brutal as ever. But there could be some motivations to kind of rally around the flag now before he overstays his welcome with this type of fighting. On the other hand, if the Iranian atomic weapons program has not been disabled, well, then that's going to be a problem. And we're going to get to that in a second. But first, I wanted to show you what Donald J. Trump said as the ceasefire was coming about, what he messaged to indicate that, we had finally entered ceasefire territory. Listen to this. Israel is not going to attack Iran. All planes will turn around and head home while doing a friendly plane wave to Iran. Nobody will be hurt. This ceasefire is in effect. Thank you for your attention to this matter. A friendly plane wave. A friendly plane wave. Now, this one kind of particularly got under my skin, considering that as I was reading this, I could hear the anti-air machine gun fire from outside Kiev try to take down the drones that were being launched at it. Now that we have made peace abroad, 160 days, he promised 24 hours. Now that we have made peace abroad, we must finish the job at home by passing the great big beautiful bill. And then he goes on and on and on and on to talk about how it's going to make America great, it's going to be fantastic, et cetera, et cetera. This is him basically claiming the mantle of peacemaker. He's made peace abroad. We don't need to worry about the foreign policy stuff now. Let's go pay attention to our domestic issues, like passing my big beautiful bill, which will continue to raise the deficit, continue to raise the debt. Let's go pass our big beautiful bill, which has opposition within the party. But the big beautiful bill stuff honestly doesn't matter. I don't want to get too beefy about the big beautiful bill. What does matter is the fact that he's saying peace abroad as the war in Ukraine continues to intensify, and the strike in Dnipro, which hit a civilian train car, killed 11 people, injured 160 others, 18 of whom were children, the youngest of whom was 6 months old. 6 months old. Peace abroad. This is not peace abroad. And these types of strikes are happening not semi-regularly. They're happening regularly. They're happening every other day to every day, depending on whether you're in Kherson or whether you're in Kiev. That is the only thing that affects the frequency, is by which Russia has the resources and the range to bring that frequency to you. Now, as Trump is doing the victory lap, which was a little delayed after he failed to deliver that quick ceasefire, as he's doing this victory lap, claiming peace abroad, ignoring what's happening in Europe and the largest war in Europe since World War II, we have a leaked intelligence report given to CNN by 3 separate intelligence assets at the Pentagon's intelligence wing, which produced a report after the strike for the administration so they could derive how much damage had actually been done to the Iranian nuclear weapons program. Because Donald Trump, up to this point, had only publicly commented by saying that the program had been obliterated, that the facility at Fordow, which was under the granite and stone of a mountain, that they used 30,000 pound bombs for, multiple 30,000 pound bomb from multiple B-2 bombers in order to dig into the earth and destroy the facility. Well, a new U.S. intelligence assessment leaked to CNN by 3 separate intelligence sources says that these strikes did not destroy the nuclear sites. They did not obliterate the sites, as President Trump said. They damaged the site. That's damages, of a delaying fashion. It is something that's going to delay their work. But what the Pentagon's intelligence wing estimates is that it will only delay Iran's work towards an atomic weapon for a couple of months. The U.S. military strikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities last weekend did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program and likely only set it back by months, according to an early U.S. intelligence assessment that was described by 4 people briefed on it. The assessment, which had not been previously reported, was produced by the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Pentagon's intelligence arm. It is based on battle damage assessment conducted by U.S. Central Command in the aftermath of the U.S. strikes, one of the sources said. The analysis of the damage to the sites and the impacts of the strikes on Iran's nuclear ambitions is ongoing and could change as more intelligence becomes available. So the report is still ongoing, but the initial report says that they're not obliterated. But their early findings are at odds with President Donald Trump's repeated claims that the strikes completely and totally obliterated Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities. I mean, we're talking about destroying not just, hey, we closed the entrance. We're going to give their excavators a lot of work in the next few weeks. We're talking about destroying the Iranian centrifuges. We're talking about destroying their ability to enrich material and destroying or capturing or obtaining their enriched material. So not only can they continue to enrich it, but also so they cannot sell it onto the black market or try to use it in some other manner, because something like that would, go for a pretty penny on an international black market. And if the Iranians do not believe that they're going to be able to get it onto a traditional warhead and a delivery system that can reach Tel Aviv and the United States, then they might seek other means. 2 other people familiar with the assessment said that Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium was not destroyed. And one of the people said that the centrifuges are largely intact. So the DNI assessment is that the U.S. set them back maybe a few months tops. The White House acknowledged the existence of the assessment, but said they disagreed with it. Now, let me read you their disagreement, and please tell me in the comments, tell me in chat, what this response reeks of to you. Does it reek of genuine, authentic, we have parsed through the facts and the details and have found this to be the case? Or is this person foremost dedicated to discrediting any other outcome but complete success for the person that she represents? Caroline Levitt, once again, with a totally well-balanced And a non-Orwellian press response, when asked by CNN, which is the outlet that gave this exclusive report, this alleged assessment is flat out, by the way, alleged assessment. Mind you, they confirm the assessment. They confirm the assessment is real. Why call it an alleged assessment? Why call it alleged if you've already confirmed to CNN that it is a real intelligence assessment from the Pentagon's intelligence wing? Why call it alleged? Is it meant to discredit their earlier statements, or is it meant to discredit that it's a decent assessment, that somehow the Pentagon's intelligence wing had done a bad job, Trump had determined? Or is it meant to just cloud people's judgment, say alleged, so if people don't know any better, they're just like, oh, is it even an assessment? Or was it not? I mean, to say alleged assessment almost implies that it doesn't even reach the level of assessment, as if they didn't even try. This alleged assessment is flat out wrong and was classified as top secret, but was still leaked to CNN by an anonymous low-level loser in the intelligence community. The leaking of this alleged assessment is a clear attempt to demean President Trump. There could be a concern that, hey, Iran could still get an atomic weapon. And if we're bombing a country that could get an atomic weapon, as an American, I have a concern about a device being used against the continental United States. Or, hey, maybe an American base where, there's going to be a lot of military hardware per square inch of bomb used. Or, hey, Tel Aviv, if you're somebody who actually, cares about the safety of Israelis. But no, or hell, even the safety of Iranians because of the conflict that could brew. No, it's President Trump. It's about President Trump. Everything and anything is about President Trump. And discredit, listen to this, and this discredits the brave fighter pilots who conducted a perfectly executed mission to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. So leaking this was intended to demean the president and go after these anonymous fighter pilots. Everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30-pound bombs perfectly on their targets. Total obliteration. Not all the way to the center of the earth. It's not like the bomb popped up in Beijing and went through the earth. If the facility is buried underground, the question of whether or not we just blew up the entrance, some tunnels, maybe some file management and information storage, or like something like that, some offices, or we blew up the core program, we blew up the centrifuges, we blew up the enriched material, we killed a bunch of new scientists with unrecoverable experience that will take decades to regain. Like, that is what matters when it comes to setting back the program years instead of weeks to months. And I say weeks to months because, again, according to the sources, they said it was months tops. Here is the statement from Pete Hegseth, Trump's defense secretary, Fox News host turned defense secretary. Based on everything we have seen, and I have seen it all, our bombing campaign obliterated Iran's ability to create nuclear weapons. Our massive bombs hit exactly the right spot at each target and worked perfectly. The impact of those bombs is buried under a mountain of rubble in Iran. So anyone who says the bombs were not devastating is just trying to undermine the president and the successful mission. Again, obliterated. Iran's ability to create nuclear weapons has been obliterated. Now, what they say is one thing. What the Pentagon's intelligence wing reports is another thing. What reality is a totally different thing altogether. They can say this all day, every day, 24/7. They can make it the declared truth. in Trump, Trump MAGA media circles. They can make it the declared truth from the administration. They can get Caroline Levitt to go out and say this every single day. If it is not true, if Iran retains the ability to continue enrichment and to pursue enrichment, and because of these bombings, possibly pursues enrichment at an even faster pace, they're going to have to do something. And this is the problem for this Trump plan. There has to be a follow-up. There has to be a negotiated settlement that has the Iranians policing themselves. Not completely policing themselves without independent monitoring, but unless you get the Iranians to agree that they are not going to get an atomic weapon and to shut down their atomic weapons program, they can always, after every bombing run, after every sabotage mission, after every scientist is assassinated, can build a new facility, get new scientists, and continue to fund the program. People can, you can try to intensify sanctions. The Chinese will still be there to buy Iranian export. You can continue to try to pressure their proxies around the region, pressure the Iranian regime directly, threaten them with regime change. They could still view all of this pressure as just another reason as to why they need to pursue the bomb, to show that the United States and Israel, after negotiating the JCPOA, which is now nothing more but done and dusted, they come over to the Iranians, bomb their program, pressure. They accept no compromise. Why would they not do anything but push forward? I'm not saying that the Iranian government is even in a position to compromise right now. I'm not in the negotiation room. I would imagine that something like allowing a civilian program with highly monitored enrichment to make sure they don't go past the 3% threshold, with a stopgap in place that will place sanctions back in place if they do go over the 3% threshold and go towards militarization of enrichment. I'm not saying that that would fail. In fact, I am very suspicious that that might even find success. And I would like to see that offer put on the table to the Iranians. We don't know if that offer has been put on the table to the Iranians. We know the Israelis don't want to accept any civilian program of any sort. But why would the Iranians, after pursuing this for so long and putting in so much effort and sacrificing so much for it, not accept any civilian program? Point is, you're going to have to make some settlement with the Iranians, whether it's with a civilian program, whether it's not with a civilian program. You're going to have to find some way, unless your commitment is, we are going to destroy the regime of the Ayatollah and we're going to replace them with something better, either through inspiring the popular action of the Iranian people, or, which no one wants to do, a ground invasion in a mountainous country of 92 million people. Ask Saddam how that went. So you're going to have to get them to come to the table. So when J.D. Vance goes out there and he says, we've destroyed the Iranian nuclear program, that's what J.D. Vance said. He said it was destroyed. It's gone. It's done. If the weapons program is destroyed, then there is no longer a problem, right? If Pete Hegseth is coming out here and saying that they obliterated Iran's ability to create nuclear weapons, these statements imply that Iran is not just delayed a couple of months or even a year or two. This implies that the problem is gone. And if the problem isn't gone, which I would find to be a more than likely scenario, what are they going to do? How did they go from the program has been obliterated to we are negotiating with the Iranians on the future of their program? How do you go from that to that? It'd be one thing to say, we have highly damaged their program. We want to let the Iranians know that we will go back and do more damage to it and make it so they won't even have civilian capacity unless they come to the table and negotiate something for the future of their people, future of their country, future of the stability of the region. But that's not the messaging we're getting. The messaging we're getting is mission accomplished. The banner's been unfurled on the aircraft carrier. Trump's giving the thumbs up. Mission accomplished in bold text. But the mission hasn't been accomplished because the Iranians tomorrow can get onto TV and still declare we're pursuing an atomic weapon, or we're not totally not pursuing an atomic weapon, but you know, we reserve the right to do with our program as we please, and they can continue with the program underground. They can. They have the ability to. Whether they have to make new facilities, whether they have to repair the facilities they have, whether they have to move the enriched uranium, whether they have to move the centrifuges, these are not unconquerable barriers. These are nothing more than speed bumps on the path towards an atomic weapon. And yes, putting some speed bumps in the way might help you in delaying the inevitable, but if the goal is to stop them from getting the bomb, you have to sit down and negotiate at some point. And that might mean not getting everything you want. One of the big things that Trump hated about Barack Obama's diplomacy was weakness, or at least the perceived image of weakness. They talked about how the JCPOA, otherwise known as the Iran deal, gave the Iranians money, which really was the Obama administration unfreezing the Iranian government's assets and allowing them to flow to Iran. But that, along with the fact that a deal on their atomic weapons program did not include their funding the proxies around the region, allowed Republicans to attack it as a weak deal. And despite Trump wrapping himself in the banner of anti-interventionism, wrapping himself in the banner of the peacenik movement, of a type of dovishness, he went through with that same type of critique against Obama as well. Despite the fact that earlier in Obama's tenure, he had critiqued him as trying to build up to bomb Iran so he can get reelected. So that critique from Trump was what? They allow a civilian program, the monitoring isn't stringent enough, and they still continue to fund proxies throughout the region. If you want them to come to the table and accept your deal, you might have to accept that having a atomic weapons deal that doesn't only cover atomic weapons, but also covers denying them a civilian program, and also covers denying them shipping weapons to Hezbollah, denies them shipping weapons to their proxies in Iraq, denies them from shipping weapons and resources to the Houthis in Yemen. That doing this one-all, end-all deal to reorganize the Middle East is highly unlikely. And if you want to deny a deal that might not achieve everything you want, but might deny the Iranians a nuclear weapons program, you are accepting a certain amount of risk when it comes to them succeeding in the production of an atomic weapon that is going to be inherent of the strategy of continuously just bombing their program into submission every few months or every couple of years if it derives more success. Eventually, you're going to have to negotiate something. And I wanted to listen just quickly before we wrapped up to how Republicans on the Hill are going to probably try to tassel with this intelligence assessment. Here is Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCaul, Republican.
It was never to completely destroy these three facilities, but rather cause significant damage. But it was always known to be a temporary setback where they could then rebuild the centrifuges. I think right now the key is to keep applying the pressure, the leverage.
So why do you think the president is saying what he's saying?
By the way, when they say rebuild the centrifuges, according to the report, the centrifuges are intact.
Applying the pressure, the leverage.
So why do you think the president is saying what he's saying in public, if that's the case?
Well, because it did cause significant damage. And he had 12, 30,000 pound bombs being dropped. Right? It's all a matter of semantics. I think the president, thinking it completely.
I don't know. If I said I obliterated ISIS, and I had my vice president come out and say the ISIS is destroyed, and then they pop up and take another city, or, in 3 months, they're back to taking cities again. Like, that's not obliterated, is it? I mean, obliterated, destroyed, these imply that the problem is gone. But again, this is why after He bombed these facilities. If you're going to engage in this type of bold action, you should follow it up with come to the table, negotiate. Maybe we could see what you'll be able to keep instead of a atomic weapons program. Instead of peace, 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 and just trying to show that, you know, you are not the warmonger that the podcasters call you.
And damage is
30,000-pound
completely
bombs
obliterated,
being
right?
dropped. It's all a matter of semantics. I think the president, you know, thinking it completely obliterated. Look, it caused significant damage. It was a temporary setback, however, a temporary enough to now have negotiations.
Also, one thing, even though, again, the White House denies this intelligence assessment is accurate, one thing that tells me it might be accurate is that the Republican government, Trump's government, the party of the grand old party, the same party that talks about, you know, tyrannical government control and, you know, the abusive powers of the office, denied a meeting they were supposed to have, shut it down tomorrow with members on the Hill about the strikes on Iran to give them some form of assessment of why they did it, what happened, what the impact was, etc. That's been delayed. They've kicked the can down the road. Now, mind you, according to the War Powers Act, they should have already known about the strike. They should have already been briefed about the strike. They should have already been informed. So this is something that should already be done. Then the Trump administration says, fine, we'll do it like 4 days after on Tuesday. And then after, say, we're going to do it 3 to 4 days after, they decide, never mind, we're not going to do it 3 to 4 days after. We're not going to do it for quite a bit. We'll get back to you when we'll do it. Because if it's not going to come on Tuesday, is it going to even come this week? Are they going to have to wait until June for an intelligence assessment on something they're supposed to get within 48 hours? These are the basic tasks of governing. These are the basic tasks of informing our government, of informing the different sectors of our government of what's going on that can actually create security issues. Because if we have legislators that don't know what's going on, then they cannot legislate appropriately, and you're basically placing all of your trust in the President of the United States on security issues and as the main arbiter and knowledge holder of them. Also, I do want to say, if you don't think that this intelligence briefing was delayed for this reason, members of the House tend to disagree. While we haven't gotten a lot of say as to why this was delayed, we did get from one House Intel Committee member, Democratic Representative Mike Quigley, there is widespread belief in Congress that the embarrassing content of the intelligence assessment provided by the Pentagon is the reason why the Trump administration decided to delay the news on the classified briefing. They don't delay briefings that have good news. They have to negotiate as much as they don't want to. There's no other option. If they want to stop an atomic Iran, if they want to stop the Ayatollah from having his finger on the big red button, you cannot just do it by endlessly bombing the Iranians.